That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about El Conde, the Count, the 10th film directed by Pablo Larraín, which will be premiering in competition at the 2023 Venice Film Festival on August 31st. Netflix will be releasing it in a limited theatrical window the week of September 8th, and it will be available to stream on Netflix as of September 15th, 2023.
Do I know a Pablo Larraín film?
No, you've somehow avoided seeing all of Pablo Larraín's work, who's one of contemporary Chilean cinema's most notable auteurs. I think I'm still most highly in favor of his sophomore film, his breakout film, Tony Manero, which starred Alfredo Castro, which is in this. And that was the first part of his Pinochet trilogy, which included Postmortem and No with Gael Garcia Bernal. I'm also a fan of The Club, which is about a group of Catholic priests that are shuttered away in some house due to crimes they've committed, such as pedophilia, which I think has the most comparisons with this film by Larraín. He also did a biopic on Neruda, Jackie with Natalie Portman about Jackie Kennedy, Ima in 2019, and also I guess I can't believe you haven't seen it, but Spencer with Kristen Stewart as Princess Di.
Yeah.
Oh, and he also did that TV version, I believe, for Apple TV, Lisey's Story, the series with Julianne Moore based on the Stephen King novel.
Okay. Well, El Conde centers on Augusto Pinochet, who is not dead, but an aged vampire. After living 250 years in this world, he has decided to die once and for all. What's your pull quote?
A gonzo mishmash of pulpy B-movie tropes blended into a funny, if purposefully vulgar, display of horrific historical fiction is as much a narrative wreckage as it is a sublimely beautiful cinematographic achievement.
Mine is, despite great acting, glorious cinematography, and outstanding sound editing, El Conde feels like a mixed bag. Okay, the very basic story. I'm going to try. So we see that Pinochet was born like 300 years ago in France. So he's French.
As Claude Pinochet.
And he was also born as a vampire. So we see this young, handsome French man who at a point is like a soldier. And then he decides to fake his death to then transform himself into another person somewhere else. So then we see him in Chile as the Pinochet we know, this war criminal who, because of all the trouble he's caused, decides that he fakes his death again with the intention of actually dying. So he lives like on, they call it a desert, but he's like on an island.
Yeah.
He's isolated. Okay. So he had 5 children and a wife. And he chose not to turn them into vampires because he wanted them to have a normal life. So Pinochet has an assistant, Fyodor.
Played by Alfredo Castro.
Oh, I didn't say who plays Pinochet.
Jaime Vadell, who is a very notable Chilean actor, has been in several of Larraín's films, including No and The Club, Neruda.
So Pinochet lives on this island with his wife and his assistant, Fyodor. And we don't find this out until later on in the movie, but Fyodor is also a vampire, and he has dressed up as Pinochet to do killings in the city, like as a vampire.
In Santiago.
So he's doing that to lure Pinochet's children back home because they need to not only make sure that he dies, but they're there to sort through all his finances because Pinochet had money everywhere and had embezzled money, but didn't keep good records. So the children are coming to get their inheritance, but to figure it out. And one of the siblings has hired a CPA to come and assist.
And that sibling is Antonia Zegers, who's in quite a few of Chilean's notable films.
She plays Carmen. Carmen's a CPA, but Carmen's also a nun. And she has a secret mission because she wants to perform an exorcism on Pinochet because he believes his evil is coming from a demon, not knowing that he's a vampire.
Correct.
Okay.
Supposedly.
And
that's played by Paula Luchsinger, or she's played by, who's in Ima.
Okay. So now we have on this island Pinochet, his wife, the assistant, the 5 children, and this nun/CPA. But the children don't know. They just think that she's there to help figure out the finances. But to wrap it up, Pinochet falls in love with Carmen the nun, and he turns her into a vampire. Mm-hmm. She's a lovely young woman. Mm-hmm. And Fyodor, the assistant, is having an affair with Pinochet's wife.
Lucia, played by Gloria Münchmeyer.
And Lucia wants to be a vampire, but Pinochet won't turn her. But she wants it so badly because she wants to live a long life. She wants to be young again. She wants to like transform herself into someone else and be powerful in another place. So she gets Fyodor to turn her. Okay. So in the end, Fyodor kills Carmen. Mm-hmm. So Pinochet kills Fyodor. Then, what's the wife's name again?
Lucia.
Lucia dies, but we get a new character introduced. Throughout the film, we get narration.
In English.
Sounds like an older British woman, which I actually really enjoy the narration.
Yeah.
Guess who's narrating? Margaret Thatcher.
The minute we see her flying through the sky, I'm like, oh, it's Thatcher.
Well, I thought she looked like Margaret Thatcher, but I'm like, there's no way this is Margaret Thatcher. No, it's Margaret Thatcher, and Margaret Thatcher is a vampire. Not only is she a vampire, Margaret Thatcher is Pinochet's mother. Uh-huh. So when she pops up on the scene, she's like, oh, none of this is going to work for me because my son and I need to be together. Like, the relationship between a mother and a son, there's nothing stronger. So the children are spared. Pinochet lets them take whatever they want to take from the house. The other people, Carmen, Fyodor, and the wife are dead. And then we find out that Pinochet wasn't worried about his finances because what he had that was really of the most value was over these centuries he had collected all these antiquities, mm-hmm. and they're worth way more than whatever he took and stole.
Including Marie Antoinette's head.
He has her head. He has just some really impressive literature, like first edition, original, whatever. So another thing we learn is if a vampire eats another vampire's heart, because we see that's how that's how Pinochet's been subsisting by eating he's making heart smoothies.
Yeah, he puts them in a blender.
And eats them, drinks them. But we find out that if a vampire eats another vampire's heart, not only is that the best blood, but it de-ages them. So because Margaret Thatcher and Pinochet are eating the hearts of the 3 vampires they killed, they get younger. So at the end of the film, we see that Margaret Thatcher went from being a senior citizen to a 40-year-old, and Pinochet turned into a child. Mm-hmm. So the final scene of the film is Margaret Thatcher taking, young boy Pinochet to school. The end. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this shit is crazy.
And it's worth noting that Thatcher bore him because she was raped by a vampire who she later killed, and then she gave up her son Claude Pinoche for adoption.
Yeah. The movie's beautiful. It's in black and white.
Okay, so yeah, it was shot by Edward Lachman, who is a very notable cinematographer. He probably best remembered for most of his Todd Haynes work, including something like Far From Heaven, which I love. The Ulrich Seidel Paradise trilogy is must see. But he also did this great genre film called Scalpel at the beginning of his career, which is kind of the Skin I Live In type kind of movie. But watching this, there were moments where I felt like I could have been watching a Sven Nykvist frame or Emanuel Lubezki. It's beautiful.
The score is really impressive. Mm-hmm. And there's something that's happening, particularly whenever Pinochet shows up.
It's like when he's having a confrontation with Carmen.
The nun.
It seems like every time they're kind of getting together at first.
There's something with the audio that creates a reverb. So there was a lot of bass in the screening room we saw it in that was really effective.
There's weight in the sound about him.
But also the score, it's live, instrumentation. I thought it was beautiful. It complemented the cinematography really well. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting because it's a Netflix film. I hope people have systems that will allow for that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's because most people will probably see this on Netflix, and really this is something that is deserving of being seen in a theater.
I think the acting is strong from everyone. And I think the dialogue is very smartly written. It's humorous in a way that's very dry, which I like.
Yeah, it's very droll humor. I think Thatcher's narration is fun for the most part.
Yes. So why is this a mixed bag? We were talking, and I think you're right. I think because it's ridiculous, right? It's like the first time I ever walked into like a Barnes and Noble and saw like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies or something like that, you know.
Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, offbeat, and it worked for me. But I think the character of Carmen, the nun/CPA, she really threw me off. Like her intentions and how she's being very direct with this family of like a war criminal who should be very apprehensive about introducing new people, trusting anyone. Because it really should have felt more like, when you watch movies about the mob and how they're very like paranoid about new... These people seem kind of dumb and... right?
I think that's probably on purpose as well. But yeah, I agree that that's the element that kind of jars, which is funny to say in this kind of ridiculous mishmash of a movie. But really what I think I needed her to be like Laurence Olivier in The Boys from Brazil. Like the Nazi hunter. I needed some entry point, because what I think is really lost, if you've never heard of Pinochet before, I don't know that this film kind of gives you any real sense of the atrocities.
Well, especially because if you do know who Pinochet is and then you think, oh, and he was a vampire, then you're expecting like this heinous monster, right? And actually, what's funny about the movie to me is that Pinochet as an old man vampire is probably like the nicest character. He's very chill and like not violent.
Ironically, they make him seem the least parasitic, especially amongst his children and his wife and the Alfredo Castro as the white Russian that is equally vile.
But I often found myself a little disoriented because I'm not sure. Carmen, the non-CPA, is being very like blunt with the family about, oh, you were doing this wrong and that's illegal and you killed these people. And then she's a nun, but then she's kind of seducing Pinochet. I thought that was weird. Also, the film is set in modern time. But looking at it, like where they live, you would think it's like the late 1800s. But then you see there's like a modern blender and like a deep freeze that looks modern. So I thought, while it looks beautiful, I was often a little confused. And there are moments where I was felt a little tedious.
I wanted it to be darker, like maybe an Armando Iannucci film, like The Death of Stalin, which was a film that is a comedy but makes me feel really gross at the end. And I think another thing I'm missing is that level of feeling repulsed at these people.
There are some gruesome scenes though of like violence earlier on in the film. We see like someone's head being smashed in. And,
a prostitute, a sex worker, yeah.
Yeah, we see Marie Antoinette being beheaded, which is pretty clean, but you see that.
Well, then you see him licking the blade, and that is why he vowed to forever kill revolutionaries because of the French Revolution. I think there's some really interesting subversive political statements that are being made with this and tying Thatcher and Marie Antoinette and Pinochet all together.
If you're a history person, like buff, I think you would enjoy this film. I think if you know who Pinochet is and it's like, oh, Pinochet is a vampire, I don't think that you'll get what you probably assume you're going to get. I still enjoyed this quite a bit. And I would recommend it.
I would recommend. Again, if you haven't seen Tony Manero from 2008, that is a film that made me feel repulsed and repugnant because Alfredo Castro is playing this man that's obsessed with Saturday Night Fever and wanting to be John Travolta in that movie. Well, I don't know. It's very much worth seeing.
What would you give El Conde?
3.5.
Oh, I would give it 3 out of 5. Yeah, but I would definitely recommend it.
It's a good score.
Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.